London, AIM and Australia listed Aura Energy as an Australian-based minerals company that has battery metal and uranium projects with resources in Europe and Africa. It's just signed a 4.5 million Canadian dollar funding term sheet for the creation of a joint venture with an interest in gold. Peter Reeves is Executive Chairman and Managing Director of Aura Energy. He joins us now on his lockdown in Melbourne. Peter, look, it's really great to catch up with you. I'm sorry that you're locked in again in Melbourne, but nonetheless, obviously, you're able to oversee work that's going on for Aura, and you've updated investors on this really interesting development with a joint venture. Give us some more details.
Okay, we've been talking for a long time about Aura having a good suite of projects, and Sirius Uranium probably being number one, Hagen Vanadium being number two, and the gold tenements in Mauritania being number three, and number four probably our Swedish compensation claim against the government there. And the third tier project, the gold, we've been looking for 6 to 12 months now at trying to sign a deal to get the gold funding, to get the exploration going there properly. And we've just done this deal, and it's going to 50-50 deal with $4.5 million in Canadian. So it'll value the thing at about $9 million. And finally, it's really one of the best underexplored or unexplored greenstone, key and greenstone belts in the world. And we'll finally get some drill holes into it.
What's prompted this move? Is it because you now have sufficient resource to move ahead with it, or is it the fact that we've seen gold now trade above $1,800 an ounce, which of course does bring a lot of other projects which otherwise might not be economically viable into the frame? What is it that's driven this move?
There's no doubt about it. Gold at different times, as we know, shines, pardon the pun, but and now is one time of that. But our tenements are very, very special. The greenstone belts in both Australia, around Kalgoorlie, and in Canada are special areas. And there's literally hundreds of gold mines and discoveries and, base metal nickel discoveries on those Archean greenstone belts. We've got one big neighbour to the north of us. It's the only discovery on our belt. It's only 40 kilometres away, and that's Kinross's Tasiast mine, and that was 20 million ounces. And we're just to the south of that. Kinross have half the belt, we have the other half. And we've always known it's a very, very good prospect, and we knew we'd get the funding, and it's finally come through. So I think gold is important, and gold is working in our favour, the allure of gold at the moment. But what really has driven it, I think, frankly, is the quality of the tenements and the prospects.
Just to quickly clarify, if you can, on this joint venture, you say it's a 50-50 venture. My understanding it's a TSX listed. Chilean Metals, I believe, is the company you've gone in with. How's the JV structured? You've got your 4.5 million Canadian now on the balance sheet waiting to go. Have they contributed the same amount, or are they contributing a different sort of a skill set or whatever to balance the interest in this project?
Okay, so we will contribute. We'll have a joint venture vehicle. That could eventually be listed. It'll most likely be listed. And the joint venture vehicle requires us to vend all of the Mauritanian gold assets in, and progressively over 1 year, they will vend in the 4.5 million Canadian. So it's really as simple as that. Now, what's interesting about that, and it's a good question, is that Chilean can also bring external investors into that vehicle. It won't necessarily just be Chileans' money. So we could end up having some very interesting and significant investors who like gold coming into that vehicle. So we think it'll have some broad appeal. So we think it'll drive the strength of this listing fairly hard when it goes.
And what's the money going to pay for? How long is it going to last? What's the aim for its use?
Yeah, look, again, good question. The initial work we will do will be a bit more geophysics and surveying broadly of the package, but we also want to get in quite quickly and drill some holes under one of our significant gold prospects. If you look at some of our presentations, we've been able to show that the mineralisation in Tasiast is very similar to some of the initial shallow holes, 100 metres, that we drilled at this prospect called Gazariet. And if we can match the geology between the two with a few deeper drill holes, then I think it'll get people very excited. We've also had some really significant nickel and cobalt hits over some kilometres. And the cobalt hits were as high as 0.58%. That's exceptionally high and very valuable ore if you could turn it into a resource. So yeah, initially geophysics, then some drilling. It's a big piece of ground. We've got to find a prospect that holds a resource and then build it from there.
I want to bring up the share price, because this is a fairly sort of long-term share price. When we look at it, you can quite clearly see the uptick on the right-hand side as a result of what you've just been doing. I mean, you've got on record before as expressing your frustration about how junior miners are not really rewarded for the work that you're doing. Now, this gold news has gone some way, I guess, to correct that in terms of share price. To what degree is this rise in shares just a representation, do you think, about the gold project that you've outlined here and the funding you've got? Do you think this could be the catalyst to bring investors in to recognize the fact that you've got these vanadium and uranium projects under your belt, which, as you then said, perhaps maybe might give them a better understanding about what it is you're trying to achieve as a small cap miner?
Yeah, no, again, good question. We've always believed that, Tiris is a very valuable project. We have a completed definitive feasibility study on that project. And we also have a good scoping study completed on Hagen. Frankly, those two projects are worth vastly more than what the gold is. But the valuation implied on this gold is around about 10 million, which was the market capitalisation before we announced the deal. So I think we've always talked, as I said earlier, about the sum of the parts valuation. If we can get the gold separately listed and funded, and not draining on Aura, get Hagen also separately listed or out in another transaction, then both those share prices for those vehicles can reflect back into Aura and show that, the value between a uranium project, a vanadium project and a gold project is much higher than where we've been sitting recently. So yeah, it's frustrating, but we know it's the world. We know it's about startups. We know it's about junior miners. Tech's the big rage at the moment, but tech needs metals, and we're going to supply the metals.
Well, I was going to say that actually, you're really playing into battery metals and so forth, this environment that everybody's talking about at the moment, and let's hope that people get a better understanding about what it is you're doing. Just quickly update us as well on where you are with vanadium and uranium, because it's clearly an important part of your operations. Yeah,
look, as I said, the Tiris project completed the DFS in the middle of last year. We have been working on the financing of that project using Export Credit Agency finance, and that's been progressing. In a parallel sense, we've also been looking at offtake with some of the utilities, and that will help the financing as well. So there's things progressing there. The great thing is with Tiris uranium is uranium price is probably the best performing commodity this year, up 40% or more. And, we think it can go on. We think we need to see the utilities come in and start signing long-term contracts, and that will be positive. On the Hagen vanadium, we are really at the moment just looking, not a lot of work going on the ground, but just looking to get a transaction done similar to what we've done on the gold. We've spoken about it for a while, so that it can have a life of its own and it can operate properly in Swedish daylight hours with a Swedish team, not a Melbourne-based team in lockdown trying to do something in Sweden. So, and the last thing I'll just touch on there, I'm now terming it our fourth asset, is that the Swedish government confiscated our uranium tenements when they changed the law there. We're very serious about progressing the claim, which has been lodged and recognised by the government. And we think that could also be a significant contributor to Aura over time.
Yeah. Let me just quickly pick up on one final point. Brings us back to where we started, I guess, and the fact that we're all doing everything from home at the moment. What's your view as a chief executive or a managing director of a company that does own office space? I mean, we're in this really strange sort of environment at the moment globally. What is your outlook for your cost base in terms of where you see your staff located?
Yeah, there's a very significant CEO in Australia, Ahmed Fahua, who runs Latitude Finance. He's got lots and lots of staff in one of the big office areas in Melbourne. And he put out some comments recently saying that he's only using 3% of his extremely large office space in Docklands in Melbourne. And he said, it's not going to change. So I sent that around to my board and we talked about it, and we are going to drop our office space. We have really worked effectively on Zoom from home. We need a space to get together every now and again, but the way you operate globally in a junior mining company like this with projects in Africa and Europe means you often are remote anyway. So it's a natural extension of what we're doing. So I think it's a cost you have to look at. And I think if you're not going to do something about office space, then you're not thinking right.
Yeah. Okay. Look, Peter, we'll leave it there. But thanks indeed for joining us. That's Peter Reeves. He's Managing Director and Chairman of Aura Energy. Just want to quickly return, if I can, to the share price chart. I think it's worth looking at as we're talking. And Peter, there talking about what's happening. And you can see here in the London session in today's trade, we're up 27.8%. You can see the big gains that we've got. This joint venture, clearly a catalyst for the upside here. You can see in the context of the declines that we've seen for this stock, but nonetheless, a lot of interest now around this company. And part of it obviously is gold. But obviously, as Peter was saying, there are other legs to the business which are worth looking at. Peter, thanks indeed for your time there on Lockdown from Melbourne.